Alright, so what the heck even is this? How did this even get started? About a month and a half ago, Nils asked me to make a video for this channel. I've never really made a YouTube video before, but I knew that I wanted to make the video and I didn't even really have a topic for making a video. So I was like, I need to get something ready so that I can start making YouTube videos and so that they look good. And I had an idea immediately in my head for what that looked like. I knew I wanted a ring light and I knew how my camera should be able to be adjustable in it, but I didn't go out on Amazon and do the intelligent thing, which was look up to see whether the product existed. So I just immediately jumped in and started making stuff. And this is how we got here, basically. So if your question is, why does this exist? Sometimes you just gotta follow your passions and go learn something new and try it out. And you get a cool product out of it at the end. And that's exactly where we are today. So this was what my initial idea was. I'm gonna show you a little bit about that.
Okay, so here's the ring.
Wait, sorry. I'm really sorry for interrupting. I forgot to introduce myself. My name's Devin. I've been doing 3D modeling and this sort of thing for about 17 years now. And in real life, I'm an industrial design professor. Okay, that's all I needed to say. I just wanted to make sure you weren't wondering who I was, but go on. Sorry.
Anyway, inside the ring light is another ring, and inside of that is the phone. The phone needs to spin, so what we're going to do is we're going to stick some bearings all around the outside of it. And we're going to need to hold that ring in place somehow using some clips. I don't know how they're going to get attached yet, but we'll figure that out as we're going. Next, we're going to need to make sure that bearing stays in place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spring load one of them so that it maintains perfect tension. I just don't know about the tolerances on the print, so we need to compensate for that. Finally, and maybe most importantly, we also need to hold the phone in place. So what we're going to do is stick some clips on the side here. These clips are going to slide back and forth on rails so that the phone is held in place even when it's turning around. And the last thing that's a little bit hard to draw is to make sure that the back of the holder is open so that when you flip the phone around, you can still see what you're recording when you're looking through the back of the ring light.
All right, now that we got all that boring stuff out of the way, we can actually start doing stuff in real life. First, what we're going to need to do is take some measurements of the phone and of the ring light specifically. That way we can do a little bit of napkin math to figure out exactly how big the bearings should be.
So we need to fit an iPhone 15 Pro Max into the ring light. I've decided that 10 inches was a good size for the ring light. And as a result of that, 16 millimeters is a good size for the bearings. So they have enough room for it to fit, but they'll also fit well into the slot and won't fall out. I've also got these metal bars that are actually axles that I'm going to move the clamps back and forth on. I have a pack of springs that I just bought on Amazon. And then I've also got this assorted screws and bolts to give myself lots of options for attaching things to each other.
Okay, so I know I said that the boring part of the video was over, but this is the part of the video where I show you Fusion 360. And I'm gonna be perfectly honest, I did almost this entire project in Fusion 360. So there's gonna be a decent amount of that in here. But I'm also going to try and keep it as fresh and non-tutorial-y, if you know what I mean, as possible. So keep an open mind.
All right, let's start actually designing here in Fusion 360. First thing I did was remodeled the ring light so that I can build based off of it. I took some pretty close measurements with some calipers, and then I just rebuilt it here. Now that I've got that piece, I can really easily make the clips based off of it. As you can see, this is the very first thing I printed out, and when it snaps onto the ring, it's got a very nice, satisfying snap.
Nice.
Which means I got all the measurements right, and we can proceed with making the other things. So next thing I made was the ring. During the original version of it, I actually had this as two pieces so that there wasn't any support material. But that didn't work out at all. It made the entire top of this really floppy, as you can see here. So the version you see here is actually with the two pieces combined. I still haven't quite figured out how to attach this to the clips yet. We'll get to that later. As you can see, I also put all of the bearings in just so we can sort of see how they fit in. And this is also the point where I decided to put the phone in. I made a mistake here by not including the buttons on the phone, which turns into an issue later on. But for now, this will work for figuring out how the clamps will look. All right, as you can see, I've installed the clamps now, and I've also put in the bars that they'll slide on. This version of the clamps did not work at all. They mash the buttons on the phone and send it into SOS mode really frequently, and they also turn off the camera and all sorts of little problems there. So these get pretty radically redesigned later on. The next piece I made was the piece that the bars and the bearings fit into. This is probably the piece that I had to readjust the most because I didn't make the holes for the bars quite deep enough. Anytime you put the phone in, the bars would pop out, which is really annoying. And as you can see, I also built a little piece, I guess you could call a strut in the back here that connects the two sides of the phone together. Originally it was two pieces, but that overcomplicated it, so I've got it actually merged into one here in Fusion now. Finally, we're moving on to the very last piece, which is the strut that holds the left and right side together in the front, and it also holds the spring-loaded bearing in place. As you can see, the little spring-loaded bearing part slides back and forth, a little slot there. This one I had to redesign probably 2 or 3 times as well to get it to slide nicely in there. Which just leaves us with the proverbial white whale. The only piece that we still haven't completely figured out yet is how to get the central part to clip into the ring on the outside. And this just was not an easy task. I didn't have enough room between the outer light ring and the inner rail ring. I didn't give myself enough space to begin with, and I was designing against it. If I wanted to give myself more space, I would have had to redesign everything on the inside. So a little bit more planning here probably would have been a good idea. Eventually we figured it out, and it just required stuffing it in there, and a result of that is that we got a happy accident in what the clips look like. As you can see, they're little wedge shapes, which makes it really easy to push in from the front, and because it's such a tight fit, they don't want to come out in the back either. So that ended up working out pretty well, but I would recommend not leaving something like this, very important part, till the very end of your build.
So everything you've seen up to this point has only been from V1 of the phone holder. Everything that happened after that in the timeline, which you'll see we're only about halfway through right now, all came after I'd printed it out in real life and seen what some of the issues are. What I'm really glad that I did though was printed the entire thing to be modular, which enabled me to save a whole bunch of plastic and print time because I only needed to print out the pieces that I'd made improvements to.
All right, I know what you're thinking. Oh no, we're only halfway through the timeline. But I'm not going to put you through watching all of the other changes that I made. There were only 3 big changes that I want to cover here. The first is on the back strut, where I've added this additional arm to hold the metal bar. This had 2 benefits. One, it made the assembly much easier, but the other is that it prevented the clamps from overextending in the back, and that made everything slide together a little bit easier when you try to put your phone in. Next is that I added small standoffs on the bottom here that the springs can attach to, once again making assembly a little bit easier, but this also straightened out the springs and made them a lot more effective. The last big change that I made, and this is probably the most important one, is readjusting the clamps. As you can see now, instead of having clamps in the top and bottom corners, there's just one big clamp in the middle. This makes it much easier to slide your phone into so that the clamps don't roll over the buttons and activate a bunch of modes on your phone that you don't want. It just works now. Everything else in the timeline are small tweaks on tweaks that I used to get to the very final design here and make sure that all the tolerances worked really well with each other, and so that everything fit together and worked nicely at the end.
All right, so that's it, except for the whole part where I installed it in my desk. And the time that I broke it. But I'm not going to get into that. I have been talking for way too long already, and I'm so ready to move on to another project. I have lots of really good ideas for future videos, things that are a little bit more toy related and exciting. But if you like this video, I highly recommend hitting that thumbs up button and subscribing. And until next time, my name is Devin, and you've been watching the 3D Printing Zone.